In this lesson, we'll build some of the pieces for the trucks of the skateboard. So we don't really have the option to create NURBS primitives as you would in maybe some other applications, but what we can do is create regular standard primitives and convert those into NURBS. So in this case, I'm going to start by coming into the kind of our front view, which is really the side of our object based on the way that we've built it. And I'll go ahead and create this cylinder right in here. So I'm going to go ahead and drag out a cylinder, maybe about that size, and I'll go ahead and give it some height there. And now I can come in from the top and we'll just scale this out. I'm going to go ahead and say, go to the hierarchy panel, say Effect Pivot Only, Center to Pivot. And then I'm going to scale this out, maybe something more like that. I'm going to offset this a little bit towards the back of the bracket that we've got there. Okay. And now what we want to do is add a little bit of detail to this. Let's go ahead and convert this to a NURBS first. So we'll select the object, and it's still a primitive. We haven't converted it to an editable poly or anything like that, and that'll give us the option to now convert this to NURBS. Okay, so you can see it's now a NURBS surface. If I go to Select Surface CVs, it'll give us those particular CVs. Now if we'd like to add additional lines in here, what we can do is go to Insert. Okay, we can insert a column, which in this case goes that direction. We can insert a row going that way, or we can insert both at the same time. Okay, and we would just left click to add that. So let's go ahead and insert a column on either side of here. Okay, let's do the same thing over here on this side. So again, insert column. Okay, this is going to be kind of like inserting isoparms, if you're familiar with that. And so now we can come in and let's go ahead and deactivate that. And I want to select each of these columns. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and that will select that entire column. If we click on this little column CV button, and let's go ahead and scale that down. Let's do the same thing over here. So we can start to add a little bit of detail in here. Alright, to kind of close these ends off, if we'd like to do that, go ahead and go to Surface CV, and let's add a line right in here. So we'll insert another column, and let's insert a couple right here. Alright, and now deactivate that, select the end column, and let's go ahead and scale this down a bit. So we get something like that. You can see that kind of holds that shape a little bit more. Let's go ahead and do the same thing over here on the other side. Again, we're going to insert column right into here and one right next to it. And then let's deactivate that, select this end column, and we'll scale this down a bit. So we end up with a shape that is something like that. If we want to come in here and add some extra columns right in here, we can do that, and that can kind of tighten that up. We'll also go to our surface approximation, make sure that our approximation is set to high. Okay, let's do the same thing right over here, just to add a little bit right in there. So just something like that. It doesn't have to look exactly the same, but that'll be kind of a good base for us, and I do want to offset that to the back just slightly. Now I want to have kind of a curved shape coming down from this base. So for that, let's go ahead and go to our orthographic view, and let's choose to use a torus. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and drag our torus out into the viewport. Okay, I'm going to scale this up and kind of get it in a rough position. If we go to modify, we can change our the radius that we have there. So you end up with maybe something like that. Okay, I want to kind of concentrate on the section between this piece and this piece. So I want to intersect with both of those. So maybe something like that. All right, we can take our divisions, our segments down to maybe 12 or so. Let's take our sides down to 8, and let's convert this into NURBS. Okay, so now at this point, go ahead and choose our surface CVs. We can see there's a lot of the torus that we don't necessarily need. Okay, so what we want to do is actually cut this apart. So let's go ahead and select the surface. Let's go down under the surface common and let's choose break. We don't want to choose break column. You can see that in this case the column is going the other direction, so in this case we want break row. And so that will give us the blue highlight where we're going to actually break this geometry. And we want to go ahead and break it. We want this to be the back end, so we're going to break it somewhere inside the pink sphere. So we'll go ahead and click on that, and then somewhere up inside here we'll break it. Now if we go ahead and deactivate that, we choose surface, we can now select the pieces of the surface that we don't need, and we're left with this piece here, which we can then look at. And if we go to our perspective view, you can see what that looks like. Now I want to shape this a little bit more. So here in our perspective view, I'll go to wireframe, and I'll start to select some of these CVs, and I want to make sure I've got single CV selection on. And I'll select those, and let's go ahead and just scale those out in the Y, so something like that. You can also make sure that you go to your believe a row selection and scale them that way as well. So you can come in here and select that row, scale that out, and just get it kind of a wider base as it comes into this piece. Okay, so you end up with something like that. And now on this, we'll go ahead under the surface approximation and change that to high. All right. So that's another piece that we have. We have one more piece to create. So let's go ahead and do that. And from the top view, let's go ahead and create a cylinder. So something like that, give it a little bit of height. Let's go ahead and bring this down from the front into a kind of a rough position here. And let's go into our perspective and take a look at how we can manipulate this. Okay, so let's go ahead and convert this to a NURBS and see what we've got. So we've got our NURBS geometry. We'll look at our surface CVs. Now I want to create kind of a indentation here to begin with for kind of a big bolt to attach this up to the main body of the skateboard. So if we don't have any lines in here, we want to add those, but since we do, I'll go ahead and select, in this case, instead of a row, a column. All right. And let's actually just scale this in a bit. So you end up with something like that. All right. Let's insert a column. Let's insert one here and here, so we have a little bit more resolution to work with. And then with that middle part still selected, we'll go and push that in and scale it a little bit smaller. So we've got this sort of indentation here for our bolt to attach to the skateboard. And again, we can come in, and if we wanted to add a couple lines in here to shape that a little bit more. So we end up with something like that, which we can then look at our surface approximation, set that to high. All right. We now need to go ahead and bring part of this up into this cylinder. So we'll select our surface CVs. Let's go to our sort of a top view here, and let's select basically all of these, making sure to have our single CV selection on so you don't get all of those selected. All right. And so with these selected, we can actually select, go ahead and grab the rest of those as well. And we'll go back to our perspective, and we want to just pull this up and scale it so that it goes up and into, and do that, up and into the large pink cylinder. So we'll go ahead and bring this up, and I also want to sort of scale that out a bit. All right, let me check that and make sure I don't have anything selected that we don't necessarily want to have selected. Okay, let's kind of scale this up a bit, and let's rotate this so that the geometry is a little bit less stressed out there. All right. And we'll go ahead and scale this out a bit. So we've got something like that. It doesn't have to look exactly the same, but we just want it to penetrate into this cylinder. So at this point we've got all of these different pieces, and we don't have really any smooth transition between them. We'd like to make it look like they're built of one piece. So in the next lesson we'll look at using fillets to create the illusion that these are all seamless pieces. All right, so we'll go ahead and do that in the next lesson.